So I feel like as long as you have your intent is in the right place and you have people around you, community, then you're able to reflect on why you made the choices you made. And unfortunately, sometimes those costs are painful, but I honestly think that they're worth it as long as you have the support to process what the repercussions are and to not do that by yourself.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Two Black Women. We are no longer on your waves, we are also on your screens. And this time I am here with somebody who I met back in my days at Western. I know, my undergrad days. And when I met her, she told me that she was going to become a doctor. And I don't know what happened, but when I looked into her eyes, I knew it was a done deal. And now I'm sitting next to her and she is on her journey to becoming a doctor. So I want to introduce you to my dear friend. Hi.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's honestly a pleasure to be here and to see, of course, as I'm becoming a doctor, you also became a lawyer. So whatever it is that we had in store at Western obviously came to fruition. I'm grateful for that.
So introduce this platform to who you are.
Okay. So I'm Chantal Philips. I'm a third year, going on to fourth year medical student at the University of Toronto. And I'm also a project manager for The Price of a Dream that's focused on reducing barriers to medical school applications for those who are from lower socioeconomic status backgrounds.
No big deal, like med school isn't hard enough.
Just...
So before we get into any of the serious questions, have you ever played Convo and Chill?
I have not. I'm very excited.
Oh my gosh. Okay. It basically says 99 controversial conversation cards. So I am going to ask you to pick up 3.
Okay.
And we both have to answer one of the 3 that you pick. I'm just going to do half the deck. And I'm going to pick one and then we both have to. So, come on.
Ooh. Okay. 2.
I promise I'm not cheating. I don't even know what cards you got.
3.
Okay, I'm just going to pick these 3. Okay. Don't tell me what they are. Just look at them.
Okay.
Ooh.
Ooh, these are good questions.
You got good questions?
I got good questions.
I don't feel like I the first one is, let me see what the other ones are. Oh, I like this one. Okay, do you want to go first or should I go first?
I can go first.
Okay, you go first.
Which of the 2 is more important for you in a relationship, loyalty or love? So do I have to answer that one or are you answering that one?
Yeah, you're going to have to answer first because I need some time.
Very, very true. I feel like maybe it's a cop-out to say you have to have loyalty in order for love to be established. I feel like if you don't trust your partner, then it's challenging to actually invest yourself. You're always going to be on guard. So I'll say loyalty. No chicken for the egg versus egg for the chicken. Loyalty before love.
I feel like I might have to pick love. Actually, I think I might. We're talking romantic relationships here.
Yes,
right?
That's true.
Imagine loyalty. Imagine like this person's loyal to you in and out every single day, but they don't love you.
Yeah, when you frame it that way. Why are you changing my mind?
Sorry, you had to pick your answer. Mine is love. I'm gonna pick love. Okay, I'm gonna give you one question. If you could spend a day with a person, dead or alive, who would it be?
And are you answering that one first?
Oh, do I have to go first? I didn't even think of an answer. I think it would be Oprah. I just need to know how she did what she did, how she got there. Like, I just feel like she's a living legend, and what she did in our community was like so trailblazing. Like now we're like, Oprah, of course Oprah's Oprah. But what she did was, so I know she's still alive, so maybe one day, we'll be hanging out.
I see you. You're on that level. You're on that level.
Thank you. I'm getting there.
I see you.
We're going to do it slowly.
5-10 years from now.
Okay.
Dinner with Oprah.
Dinner with Oprah. Signed. It's a prayer. God, to your ears, God, we want to see it. So,
I believe it.
Who would you pick?
Is it super spiritual Christian to say Jesus? Like, I know.
Listen.
I want to see what it was like to be walking in those like old school slippers, like what it was like to be rebuked by the Lord right then and there. I feel like it'd be really dope to just walk with Jesus.
I feel like he'd get your whole life together.
He really would, and I need that.
You're like, I need my life together. Mm-hmm. Hold it down.
Just dinner. Just break some bread.
Break some bread.
Yeah, that body.
Are we talking before or after the cross though? Because like that.
Ooh, resurrected Jesus.
Resurrected
I need that
Jesus.
shiny Jesus.
The one,
yeah, the transfigured Jesus.
Like the sunglasses would be, I love it.
Mm-hmm. That's me right there.
You know what? Your answer was better than mine. Let me take your answer.
No, Oprah, come on now. It's okay.
But okay, I gotta ask, what made you want to be a doctor?
Yeah, so for me, I grew up in a home where my mom's PSW, which is a personal support worker, so someone who addresses some of the daily needs that a person has, so showering, food, things that you pretty much need in order to survive. And I was also in the home with a grandmother who was paraplegic, so we had a PSW who was in the home on a regular basis. So I had these examples of women, very strong women, who prioritized healthcare, but I also recognized the ways in which they were disenfranchised in that position of being a PSW. And I wanted to be able to care for patients the way that my mom cared for patients, but I also recognized that I didn't want to be in that same position of being, unfortunately, a risk of injuries, which my mom had, and then not to be able to provide for my family in a way that I think is appropriate. So for me, being a doctor would provide the platform to care for patients, but also to be able to support my family financially and create the space to advocate for people who are working in the position of PSWs, as an example, to be able to make more money and to be able to have access to the rights that they deserve.
I love that. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like being in med school or, going through the process, seeing the healthcare system, your why has changed, or is it still the same?
That is a very good question. I think it's shifted because I think while I'm in medical school, I'm recognizing how easy it is to be shifted into the culture, that there's this current that's very quickly pushing against you, and you have to make a choice every day to commit to the values that you had initially, but then to be open to changing and growing, and because you're not going to be the same person you were 5 years ago that you are today. And I think that you're going to change. It's just a matter of, what are you going to change in the current of the culture, in the current of maybe someone you don't want to be, or are you going to change in alignment with the type of doctor, the type of person that you want to be? So I think that for me, I'm a lot more aware of what my weaknesses are because I've been challenged and pressed. I never thought I'd be that person at 3 a.m. where there's someone in a mental health crisis. I just thought I'd be that person who's patient 24/7 and very capable of being a hearing ear, my shoulder to cry on. But when it's 3 a.m., you haven't slept for 26 hours, and a person is in that state of crisis, it's really challenging, and you become more aware of who you actually are. And I think in that state, I've had to confront my weaknesses and trust that over time, by God's grace, I'll be more of the person I want to be.
I feel like med school and law school are different, but they're the same in like the way the culture is so clear. Like if you don't fit in to the stereotypical culture, it's even hard to be in those spaces.
That's true.
And I feel like for me, I learned very quickly that these spaces were not made for me. But to advocate for people that look like me, I'd have to either become this culture or I'd have to be okay with being apart, to being set apart. And that was really difficult for me because I feel like everyone's like, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer. It's so glamorous on the outside. But they don't understand that the journey to be that, it's like you're fighting culture every single day. And when you don't look like what is expected, your culture is like, oh, you're different, you're a shining star. And then the culture that you're in to even get to the profession that you want to be is like, you are not one of us.
Exactly. And I think you also, in those moments, so the example that I shared, that was a Black patient. And I remember thinking, of anyone in this room, I'm the only other Black person here. And there's that level of a weight of responsibility that you have, recognizing that of anyone in that space, you're probably the most likely to advocate for them. And so when you don't succeed in that moment in the way that you hope to, it feels weightier, it feels harder, because there's that level of responsibility that's placed on you by other Black patients, by everyone who came before you, who encouraged you to get to where you are, right? There's that weight of I think, ancestors on our shoulders sometimes.
Does it feel like the whole community? I remember writing exams and thinking, if I fail this, I'm feeling my mother, my father, my auntie in Nigeria, the cousin that my uncle said that she wanted to be a lawyer. She's only 5 years old. I felt like I failed her. I failed the uncle at church down. Like, I felt like I failed everyone. And that weight, I don't feel like is on everyone's shoulders, but somehow as a Black woman, I felt I had double the weight while doing more of the work, and then also doing work to even allow people within my community to even get into the spaces that I was in. So
exactly.
It was like I was doing 3 people's jobs when there was no job. I'm paying tuition to be here. I'm literally paying to write these exams, but the expectations of everyone else felt like 3 jobs, so I'm just trying to be successful in this one. There was one thing that you said about culture. And so how did it feel? I know U of T has had some drama with the whole, they only had 1 Black student at one time in like the biggest med school in the whole of Toronto. And now I've heard about so much of that culture shifting, but it's because Black voices stood up. And so you, I remember, were one of those Black voices that stood up. And I was like, we need more Black voices. We need more people advocating. And so how was that experience while being, like, even just, you're trying to get into med school, you're trying to figure it out, but you're also trying to advocate so that more Black women, more Black men can be in these spaces?
I think that it gave me this impetus to get up every day. I think that there's days where you don't want to go to your lectures, you're exhausted, and you're frustrated by how things are going. And then you think about the fact that someone else had to sacrifice for you to be here, but then also you in that space are making space for someone after you. And I know that that's a pressure that can become a bit overwhelming and something we just spoke about, but I think overall it also gives you that energy, that drive, because in addition to it maybe being a weight, it's also a motivator. And I think being in the space, I was able to speak up a bit more than perhaps my predecessors because we had some capacity, right? We had, I think when I first got in, there was 14 or 15 Black medical students. I know. So, but imagine being able to speak up when you have 13 or 14 other people with you versus being the only. So I do recognize that being able to speak up in that space, there's a level of privilege because I knew I wasn't the only voice. Yeah. But at the same time, you also have to play the game and walk the tightrope of at what points can I say something and what point should I keep my mouth closed. And there's times I chose to not say anything because I didn't know if the gain of saying something would matter in that moment. But then there's other times where I've said something, and whether it's in one of our case-based lectures where someone says something problematic and you're the only person who is recognizing that there's something wrong and being able to speak up in that moment. I think there's those small steps of advocacy in the daily, but then there's also some of those bigger steps, like being able to write a letter to the faculty and requesting that they make a statement about something, such as the murder of George Floyd, that was a part of what we had done as well. So I think there's a combination of small steps of advocacy and then big steps of advocacy, but that advocacy never happens in isolation. You're always a part of that happening. You're always going to change as a result of that happening. And that personal change is something that matters as much to me as the systemic change, because if you're not aware of what's happening to you while that change is happening, then you end up in a place and you're questioning how you even got there to begin with, right?
Even got there. And I feel like there have been days where I woke up and I was like, I don't know how I got here, but I'm a completely different person than I started. And there's some things that were good and there were some things I had to check myself.
Exactly.
But the one thing that I want to talk more about is the when you speak and when you don't speak. I felt like my voice was amplified because I was a Black woman, and your voice is amplified in a very beautiful way, but it means that there's more eyes on you. I felt like when I walk in these cultures that aren't made for us, of course my voice is amplified, but you might be uplifting at your community, but sometimes it's at the cost of yourself. There were many times where it's like, I say something now and I know I make multiple people in this room uncomfortable, and I know that I will not have the same experience as anyone else. And so I wonder what you would tell yourself, or you would tell like a younger version of yourself or another Black woman who's in those spaces where it's like, you can speak up, but you know it comes at a cost to you, or you don't speak up and it still comes at a cost to you, but maybe not socially, but personally.
I think big part of it is weighing the cost. And in those moments, you might not weigh it correctly because as far as I know, I can't tell the future. And if you can't tell the future either, you have no idea what the full breadth of those costs or the weight of that cost is until you've made that choice. So I think that there's a weighing of that cost that comes, but I think there's also the openness and the ability to be kind to yourself when you make those mistakes. And I've spoken up in situations where my mentors later said, "Why did you do that?" That happened last year, and they asked, like, why didn't you consult me before? You said this, you tweeted this on Twitter, and you said this to this professor. And I've had those moments, and I find for the most part though, they always work out. I'm still in medical school.
Come on,
I haven't been kicked out. So I feel like as long as you have your intent is in the right place and you have people around you, community, then you're able to reflect on why you made the choices you made. And unfortunately, sometimes those costs are painful, but I honestly think that they're worth it as long as you have the support to process what the repercussions are and to not do that by yourself.
And that's why I feel like community is so important. Community in your profession, community outside of your profession. Because sometimes you want to leave your profession, you just want to go back to your community and be like, this whack thing happened, and none of them are in your profession. They're like, that's so wacky. You're like, thank you. The people in my profession said it was nothing. And it's like, no, there's communities within your profession. So other Black doctors, other Black lawyers is so important and so vital. It's why we need those like associations and things. But it's also like, you can go back to like your community, the people who were there when you were writing your MCAT, the people who were the people who were spending those long nights with you, and like this happened, and having both of those support systems, I think like for me has been imperative, and I know speaking to you has been utterly imperative. I got to ask about Black women advocating for themselves. I wanted to speak about your journey and demystifying the beauty that is going through post-secondary education. But before that, I want to talk about, we've heard a lot of stats. We've heard the Black female mortality rate when it comes to having babies is higher than most. We've heard so many stats about Black women not getting the same care as their white female counterparts. We've heard all these stats about Black women not getting the care, but we're all in the same system. And I'm just wondering if you had any advice for Black women when it comes to advocating for themselves or even engaging with the healthcare system.
Most definitely. Unfortunately, I think we are in a system where it's necessary for you to get the care that you need. And as I will be a doctor soon, I recognize there are going to be times where I fall short as well. And so I think regardless whether it's intentional or unintentional, there's going to be points in time where your primary care physicians don't meet your needs in the way that you want them to and need them to. And that's why as a patient, it's up to you to be able to document your symptoms. If something is happening, I think it is a pressure to be the one responsible for that. But if you can have a journal where you document how long these symptoms have been going on for, how long have you been having this pain, and how has this pain changed over time, and where is it located, and has it changed in location, and has something like this happened to you before? Those are the baseline questions that you get, and it starts to sound like a script, but those are the types of questions, if you track them in a journal, you keep note of them, and you speak about them in community as well, then you have that ability to build on what's going on. And if it's changing drastically, I think that doctors will take it more seriously. It shouldn't have to require that of you, but if you do, I think you will be heard in a way that if you weren't tracking those symptoms, you might not be. And you're doing that investigative work, but it means that you're able to get to the solution a bit more quickly. At least that's what I hope. So definitely journaling, tracking your symptoms. I know Googling, sometimes people discourage you from doing it because it can get you in a whole other place.
WebMD? I have a whole...
Answer's always cancer.
Always cancer.
Always cancer.
You always got cancer and you're always dying in the next
Which, is obviously not always the case.
I know, right?
But I think that if you're in community with people who are in the healthcare system and you do that Google search and you find something that's worrisome to you, document the thing that you found that's worrisome to you and bring that up with your doctor as well, because sometimes it is cancer. And it's important for you to share, I'm worried that it's this, I'm worried that it's that. And if you communicate that worry to them, then I think there's been times where that's shifted my perspective when I work with patients too. And I spend that extra few minutes talking about why it could be or why it couldn't be. And it really makes us think a bit more openly about the options. So I think being able to document your worries is as important as documenting your symptoms.
I had never experienced that more than when I got into like a little bit of a health scare. I felt there were so many things going wrong with my body, and I was like, I thought it was in my head, and then I kept going. I kept like talking to people, and like things weren't changing. It would go up and down and up and down. And my doctor was like, I wouldn't go to my doctor, and then I would go, and then it was like it was so disorganized. And then when my doctor was like, you need to start tracking this, you need to start like telling me dates and times and what's been happening. And when I gave her those things, shout out to female doctors, I love them. But I gave her those things, she was like, okay, I think it's this, I think it's that. And we got the testing done. And of course, like to get the answer that you don't want, or to get news that you don't specifically want about specific information is very hard. You get that, and at least you get to move. At least you get to know what you're going to do next. But I think it's scary. I think sometimes in our community, it's actually kind of scary to go to the doctors, and especially when you fear for the worst. You're like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to go.
Yeah. Do you want to know the answer?
I don't know. The answer might be no.
Yeah. I feel like that sometimes as a coping mechanism, for some of us, we would rather just ignore it, and not just ignore it because we think it'll go away, but we ignore it because there's so many other things in life to worry about. And I think our bodies sometimes stop us from proceeding. We ignore our bodies, but there's gonna be a point where our bodies will be heard regardless of what you say or do. And we don't want it to get to that point, but sometimes it does. And if it does, you kind of just need to go through that process and reflecting on what's going on with me. And I've been there before. Burnout is real. And there's times where your body responds in a way because you have not processed what's going on. And if you just take that mental space to really reflect, why is my body responding this way? Then I think we would all be healthier. And that's a part of advocating for yourself, is being able to advocate for rest and making sure you actually reflect on what's going on with your body.
We've had a couple of conversations, but one of the most interesting ones I've had with you is about chronic illness.
And
it like blew my mind. And so I'm wondering if you could kind of explain what chronic illness is and how it like appears in Black women.
Sure. I think we were saying chronic pain. With chronic pain, of course, the pain mechanism is managed by the brain. And so when someone feels pain, you have that mechanism in order to alert you to an issue. The reason why our bodies experience pain is so that we can recognize, hey, there's something going wrong and this needs to be addressed. And that's a mechanism that, whether it's being caused by a physical injury or a mental injury that's then like sensitizing your body to pain, both of those are still injuries. And I think sometimes we take the physical injuries of a cut or a bruise more seriously than the mental injuries. So there's conditions like fibromyalgia where people have physical pain, but that physical pain is often very associated with a history of trauma. And so people who experience trauma and unfortunately don't get access to therapy, don't reflect on that experience with their trauma, have this increased likelihood of experiencing chronic pain that it does not get managed well with medication. And so you wonder why, if it's a mechanism, physical mechanism through the body, then why is this not being healed or addressed with medication? And we actually see with fibromyalgia that the gold standard treatment is cognitive behavioral therapy. So being able to speak to someone about your symptoms, processing the trauma that you've experienced, and then almost like rerouting your body through your mind and the thoughts that you think. And there's those very real consequences to not getting therapy and not working through your trauma. It can manifest as chronic pain. And I don't want to conflate all chronic pain with trauma. There's people who have chronic pain and have maybe not experienced trauma, but also I don't want to place all of the onus on that management on the patient. We shouldn't be blaming people for chronic pain. It's just recognizing that a condition like that, which can be so debilitating to someone's life, can be connected to traumatic incidents. And it means that in some ways people are prisoners to trauma that happened to them 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I think if people had more access to therapy and were able to work through those issues, it wouldn't affect them as so physically for so much of their lives.
I think the most interesting part, I wouldn't say cool, but it's definitely not cool, is that something that's going on in your mind, something that you meditate on and that you think of, can actually cause your body to like basically attack itself and cause pain. And it's just like so many times we hear things from aunties and uncles who are like, oh, I just feel like this little pain in my back and it's been there for years. And after I had that conversation with you, I was like, I'm not going to say everyone has chronic pain, but I was like, ooh,
that's trauma. You can't just be pointing out trauma to everyone, but...
No, I know. Once you have done the work yourself, sometimes you want to be like, that's this, but I know you can't be pointing out everyone's symptoms. Or WebMD, I basically have a medical degree for that, I promise. Last kind of thing that I want to touch on is the demystifying of successful careers that make your parents happy to talk to your aunties and uncle about. I want to kind of discuss how, and I feel like I have so much to say about this too, but it's like when something looks good on paper, or actually looks good on paper when you get your medical degree and I have my law degree, how no one really talks to you about or even thinks about how stressful it is or the experiences that you have to go through. And I know you have a very different experience going through med school, and I know if you want to talk about that, I would love for you to talk about that. But everyone just sees it as like, you got into med school, you got into law school, you're going to complete it, and it's going to be fine, and you're smart, and you're amazing, and it's great, and you have nothing to complain about. Life is perfect for you.
Be grateful.
Be grateful. Be grateful. But no one wants to talk about the journey. No one wants to talk about the nights that you cried, the nights that you didn't make it. So if you want to, I will touch on mine, and if you want me to go first, I will. But I would love for you to touch on that, because there's so many people who see you or who see me, and they're like, well, you made it. And it's like, I wish I could tell you the journey and say, like, count the cost, because it's not always easy.
No, so well said. I think for me, I had that similar experience, and it hit me right as I got into medical school. I thought there'd at least be a period of, what was it, honeymoon phase?
Right.
I thought I had no honeymoon phase.
They give you a white coat.
No, I got my stethoscope and was like, this is painful. Like from the first or second week of medical school, I found all of it so difficult. And I think from figuring out how to study and feeling so undisciplined, I remember how many weeks that went by thinking I'm not as good as my counterparts. And that imposter syndrome is extremely difficult. And I think sometimes that imposter syndrome, of course, has the ability to deter you and to make things a bit more challenging. But I think that there's the actual physical weight of being the first to do something. I was the first person in my family to go to university, then the first to get into medical school. I'm not connected to people who have that. I don't have that social capital. And I think figuring out how to study and who to talk to and what does career exploration in medical school look like, all of those were things that were just unbeknownst to me. And it meant that I kind of had to struggle through them alone. And I found it also made it a bit more difficult to build really good relationships in medical school, friends who I felt like I could relate to. And eventually that happened, thank God. But I think for me, from the beginning, from the first month, I did not feel great about it. And I wondered if I had gotten myself in over my head. And I failed my second exam. And thankfully, when you fail an exam in medical school, at least at U of T, it's more so an average of the entire block. So I was fine. I've never had to be held back for any reason. But I remember having to meet with the counselor for failing that exam. And you know what made it worse? The average was hella high. I was like bottom 2%. And so she brought me in, and then she went through all of the answers on the exam. I was like, so why did you answer this? And I just looked at her and was like, I do not know. I don't have an answer for you. And it made me realize how much my imposter syndrome was connecting to performance anxiety. And it made it really challenging for me to excel on exams at the beginning. And eventually that was fine. And I was able to work through that process and to perform well on exams. But I think that imposter syndrome had very serious impacts on how I was doing in school and how I felt, and that sense of belonging, like we talked about earlier. I didn't really have that for the first little bit. And then I ended up taking a year off last year because I still didn't really know what I wanted to do in the context of medical school. You get into medical school, but everyone's learning the same thing. And it's when you get into residency, which is after medical school, when you can specialize. And a big part of deciding that happens in your third and fourth year. And I didn't feel ready to enter my third year, not really knowing what I wanted to do yet. So I took the year off. That was also a really challenging experience because it was something that people did not endorse. They did not encourage. And I remember how many times I would speak to a counselor or to one of my mentors who said they thought it was a bad idea. And I would just end the call and cry thinking, I don't know what to do because this is the advice I'm getting, but this doesn't feel like it's what I'm supposed to do. So I took the year off, and it was the best decision I could have ever made. And despite all of the tears, God is faithful because it meant that I got really good job opportunities on my year off and am now a lot more clear on what I want to do, which is public health. So I'm grateful for that. But I think the takeaway for me is that there's always going to be opportunities for you to compare yourself. Yeah. And while that comparison is helpful, perhaps in the context of mentorship, it's not helpful when it results in you feeling like your journey has to look like someone else's journey. Yeah. And there's going to be times where you're going to take a turn that does not look like your counterparts. Doesn't mean that it's a wrong turn. It just means you're going to be walking alone for a little bit. But that process is going to result in growth, and you're going to get more clarity at the end of it. And that's what happened to me. So by the end of it, also, the people who said I shouldn't have done it were congratulating me for the jobs that I got and the contracts. So it was like, you know, it's okay. It's God's favor. I'm not going to be mad at y'all. We're still friends. But you did not believe in me. You did not believe in me.
Didn't see the goal.
No, they really didn't.
Where I was going.
But that's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
We forgive them.
I really do.
Yeah. We move on.
Yep.
I think for me, and I don't know how many people know this, but law school was terrible for me. Terrible. I'm a JD MBA. I got 2 degrees. Ooh. So when people say that, like, well, you got 2 degrees. I suffered my whole first 2 years. It was absolutely terrible. I got into law school thinking I knew. I kind of got into law school and I didn't know what it entailed. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to do anything. And then I had panic attacks during my exams, like multiple times, multiple exams. I had panic attacks. I would literally study through panic attacks. I would be in class and have panic attacks again and again and again. And I think it was the hardest for me to talk to anyone because everyone was like, you got into law school. Congratulations. How is it? Aren't you loving it? Isn't it amazing? Aren't your parents so proud? Your parents must be so proud. But I literally sat in a year of law school having panic attacks, like at least twice a week.
Wow.
Like that was my lived experience. And of course, I love my law degree and I have this amazing practice that I'm doing right now. But the idea that success, or the idea of earthly success, makes you happy or isn't struggle or doesn't come at a cost is such a lie. And I wish we would be more honest with people about the costs. Be like, okay, yes, there's some glamorous parts. I have some beautiful dinners. I've been invited to some beautiful networking events. But there's another cost that I pay in my personal life. And it stopped me from getting help earlier because everyone was just like so happy. And I was like, how can I say that this is hard? Or like, I literally feel like I can't breathe almost like every other day. Or, oh, like I'm really suffering right now, when the first thing that comes out of your mouth is like, aren't you so happy? You're one of a million. This is a one in a lifetime opportunity. And it's like, no, I'm so grateful. I can be grateful. I can be happy. I can be full of joy, but I can also tell you that this is hard and the cost is hard. And I wish we'd have more open conversations like this so that other people who are going through the journey aren't suffering in silence. Because even though it might look glamorous, some days aren't glamorous. And yeah, I think demystifying that and kind of speaking on that and being able to be like open more about it. I've seen my mentees change. Like I've had so many mentees who have got the mental health resources that they needed in the law school, or deferred exams, or took a year off, which honestly I wish I did. I'm very jealous of you. Or who reached out to a therapist. A lot of my law friends are like in therapy and have beautiful therapists and are having successful careers. But it came at me suffering through it and then having real deep conversations with them. And I just feel like that's why I started Two Black Women Even, because I was like, if we have more conversations, if we are more open about our lived experiences, then we can actually empower each other through the good, through the bad, and through the ugly. And then when we're all succeeded, when we're all at the top, we're not pretending that we're happy or pretending that we have made it when we're literally crumbling inside. But it's like, no, you have a support system. You have people who will ride for you. So don't know why I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, I am too, as you're saying that. No, it's beautiful. And I think it takes a level of transparency on your part to share your story on this type of platform, to create the space for other Black women to share their stories and to be vulnerable. But I think that there's a lot of times where we enter into these spaces, we feel like we've overcome that obstacle or hurdle, and then we're surprised by how challenging it is. And I think, like you said, you're demystifying that experience for people who are coming after us. And I think that's a huge success. You're paving ways for people.
Gotta shout out God though. He was there literally every second. I think when I couldn't have conversations with people around me, God was literally there. He's like, I got you. And now I'm sitting here and there's a song by Travis Green.
Made a Way.
Made a Way. And I promise you, no matter what, every time that song is prayed at my church or anywhere, I'll be the first person beating that altar. Because I'm like, you couldn't even understand. It looks good now. But the way that he made the darkness I have been through, the light that he has given, like he literally made a way, and I'm literally standing here. Only, like, not because Simi's smart, not because Simi's good, not because Two Black Women is going to flourish and be great, but every single thing that I am, everything that I've achieved has been because God made a way, and he lifted me when I couldn't lift myself, and he stood by me when no one else would stand by me, and he whispered, like, I am with you. Be still and know that I am God. Like, eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, have not heard, minds have not conceived the plans that I have for you. And those were the things that kept me through on the darkest days. So shout out to Jesus.
Yeah. It reminds me of like 2 Corinthians chapter 12. It talks about like God's power being made perfect in our weakness. And I remember when I first read that, it made me angry. It's like, man, why does it require me to be weak in order for you to be most powerful? I'm like, this is not a God problem. This is a me problem.
Right?
Like, I think when I am not at my weakest moment, I try to take control of everything. And yet I fail in the midst of thinking I know what I'm doing. And it's when I'm at that place, sometimes rock bottom, where I surrender. And by surrendering, God's like, thankfully, you're finally giving me the opportunity to show you who I am. And
he'll show up and show out.
Really, he does.
Every door will be
honestly
open. Doors that you couldn't even
I didn't even ask.
I didn't ask for that door.
No,
somebody be opening doors
for real, honestly. And it goes to show it's not like God's waiting for you to get to that rock bottom place, not waiting for you to get to a place of suffering. It's when we're finally willing to surrender and to let go of the steering wheel that he'll take hold of that. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that. I wish I would do it sooner and not wait till those moments.
Go back to younger me. I tell her, girl, you don't know what you're doing. Let go.
No, it's a good source of advice. I think if I was to give myself, my younger self, that advice, I need to give my present and my future self that advice is to
maybe just
let go.
Just somewhere so I could read it every day.
I like that idea.
But it has been the biggest pleasure to have you on this platform. Like, I am so happy that we could have this conversation. So I tried to do like a little 1-2 prayer before I end every podcast episode, but now we're on their screens. So if you could pray us out, if you could, I would love that.
Oh, that's amazing. I can do that.
I love it.
Okay. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this opportunity that you have granted to all of us to be in this beautiful space with each other and community, to be able to discuss what is honestly our testimony. This is our testimony. It's what you've brought us through, and it's where you're bringing us. So thank you for making that a focus for today. I pray that the rest of this day of filming goes well, and that for the viewers, it touches their hearts, and that whatever it is that they're going through, God, that you will be their strength in the midst of this. So thank you for your faithfulness, that you have never left nor forsaken us, that you love us so, so much, and that you will continue to be by us as we continue to surrender to you and let you show out the way that you show out. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is only the beginning. I hope to have you on. I hope to be able to call you Dr. Philips.
Oh, real soon. June 2023. Hey.
June 2023 is tomorrow.
47 weeks, 48 weeks, whatever it is. I was counting on my calendar.
I'm screaming.
I really am.
When you come back as Dr. Philips, we'll red carpet.
I'm ready.
Weekend.
Thank you.
I'm
ready.
So I want to let y'all know that I'm thinking about you, loving on you, praying for you, believing that God's going to do something big in your life. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode. Bye, y'all.